Welcome to another edition of Drunk Agile. With me, as always, is
Prateek Singh.
you're kind of blending into the background there. I just noticed
I
it as
am.
we
I
as we
am.
pushed
I
record. I
gotta
just
get it. Yeah, it's like
I
the
can't see you.
background.
Where are you?
The background is camouflage.
Yeah,
Not me.
maybe because of what we're going to be talking about. You don't want to be seen. My name is Andrew Vacanti. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know. Prateek, what are you drinking?
Oh yeah,
You're
I have
drinking alone
a
tonight.
yeah, I have a Benriach Glenlivet 15-year-old Manzanilla cask matured, kind of as you can tell from the color, sherried
Yeah,
whiskey. 55.2. So
cool.
safe.
Yeah. Um, and you just opened that just now for this
I
episode.
just opened
Okay.
that, so it's still breathing.
Unfortunately, Prateek's flying solo tonight. I have to drive right after this episode, so I can't drink that. Let that be a lesson, boys and girls. Don't drink and drive. Um, so let's get right into it. This something that was suggested by, or was this something that you were just angry about?
I, this is something I was just
Or
angry about.
both. We can never tell the difference a lot of times. Tonight we because we haven't done enough drunk agiles complaining about backlogs, we are going to do at least one more, and I'm sure we've got several more in us before this is all over. But at least one more. So Prateek, this kind of taking a step back and thinking about a more traditional, even probably even pre-agile
Mhm.
definition of backlog. Let's talk about why backlog's probably not a good thing. I mean, in Agile, I think the way that you said it, I mean, in Agile, we're kind of trained to think about backlogs being these great things. But if you really think about it, they're not. So take it away.
Yeah, let's as you said, let's go pre-agile. Let's go before we started thinking about these fast feedback things in software development at least. Um, I remember when I first started working software development, I showed up on day one and they handed me these things called Herculogs. And it was this list of, here are 30 things that you need to get done. Okay. And so you go through these 30 things, and this was your backlog of 30 things you needed to get through. And then once you got through those 30, you dumped them all on some poor person who had to then test that. That 30 thing backlog became the tester's 30 thing backlog, which other developers had dumped more stuff on them. So they had probably an 80 thing backlog. And then that, when they were done, became the build team's backlog. Then that became the deployment team's backlog. Essentially, these backlogs were queues from a prior part of a process created for a later part of the process. And as most of the listeners to this podcast, most of the watchers of this channel would know, this was one big thing that Agile kind of did was, hey, how do we get rid of these things so that things can go through instead of things sitting in these queues, things sitting in these backlogs? At some point, Agile comes along and realizes these backlogs are actually a bad thing.
Yeah, I thought you were going to take it one step further. Maybe you're
Oh,
leaving it for me to do this because you
yeah.
you want me to have something to say, which is fine. Thank you very much.
And I want to drink.
Hey. Um, but if we think about the term backlog outside of the agile industry, we were talking about this before we pressed record. You're kind of hard pressed to find another industry where if you say, "Hey, I've got a backlog of these items," that's necessarily considered a good thing. Not and even forget about the judgment, good versus bad. That hey, we need to have a person responsible for managing this thing and
Mhm.
prioritizing this thing and assessing value of this thing. No, and I can't, just off the top of my head, I can't think of another industry where you would have this concept of a backlog and purposefully put in place someone to manage it and consider that to be a good thing, right? I
Right.
mean, I think most everywhere else would be like, are you nuts? Right? I couldn't think of a polite way to say that. And I'm not even drinking. I mean that it just the whole idea, the whole notion of, the backlog that should be this reverential thing that we all kneel and pray to. It's just, I don't know,
Yeah,
stupid.
there's and we should probably make the clear distinction of when we say backlog or things that are in the back, we mean things that have been, here is a list of items we need to do, and we expect these to get done. We're not necessarily talking about, oh, here's a dumping ground of like, random ideas that show up, and we're not really committing to doing these. We might not do these, but especially from the agile framework perspective, agile frameworks perspective, it is here's a list of items, and we expect that these will flow through a system and get done.
I was trying to think. I don't know. I maybe, on some level, I am kind of actually extending my remarks to the dumping ground because, if you have this person who's responsible for managing
Well,
that
yeah.
dumping ground, then
Yeah, I mean, and then I guess that's probably the other criteria for this. When I think dumping around, I think, okay, we entered it, forgot about it. We're not. This is just sitting there, and 6 months later, 2 years later, we're gonna come back and say, oh, let's just delete half of this stuff.
yeah.
That's
I
what I'm
mean,
thinking.
I'm sure I've told this story before, so I'm not going to say the whole thing. But you and I both have had experience with this. Like I worked with an insurance company way back when, who was bragging about the fact that they had a 12-year backlog. They legitimately thought that was a good thing. They had a 12-year backlog of things they were going to do. I know you've
Yeah,
recently
no, we've seen it.
worked with companies, I think,
Yeah,
when even recently, that had a multi-year backlog. And just the effort that goes into managing that. I mean, forget about even trying to assess value. Just even, you know uh, how do you store that? How do you share it? How do you communicate it? How do you just the logistics around
how
having
do you
something
find
that big?
anything in it?
Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know, it's mind blowing. So I don't, I mean, I personally don't have anything too terribly profound to say on this subject, other than it struck me as interesting when you mentioned, it's like, um pick an agile framework, pick your favorite agile framework, and chances are they will have a notion of a backlog as something that you must have, and that it must be revered, and that it must be managed, and that it must be. Whereas most any other industry that you look at, they're constantly thinking about, we've got a backlog, that's bad. How do we get rid of our backlogs, right? How do we get
Yeah.
rid of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you start thinking about backlog as queues, and that's kind of what that traditional pre-agile thing was. These were these queues. There are only two ways to actually get things to get things to reduce the size of queue. One is you take everything out of the queue and start working on it, which is essentially increase your work in progress and kind of shoot yourself in the foot. Or you actively reduce the size of the queue by saying, oh, we're going to limit the WIP on this, to the point that the queue doesn't exist anymore. In fact, in an ideal system, you're not wasting time if the queue doesn't exist.
Yeah, and
And
yeah, and you're using the keyword. I would say, by extension, of course, if you're a flow person, whenever you hear the word queue, you're thinking investment, you're thinking inventory. You're thinking both of those things. It's a keyword, but there are really a bunch of I words in there that you really should be thinking about. And both of those things are bad. Um, you kind of just had the last word. I don't know if I have anything to add to that. Is there one final thing that you want to say to sum everything up? Because I'm,
if yeah, it's kind of everything we've been saying, which is in general, backlogs are queues that take up that are essentially a time suck. If possible, remove those from your process. Just because your framework tells you to have one doesn't mean you have to stick to it.
Love it. So that's it. What do you think? What do you think about this notion? All of you, not Prateek, but all of you out there in TV land. What do you think about this notion of backlogs? Are they good things? Are they bad things? Have we shot ourselves in the foot in terms of introducing this idea of backlogs as a good thing? We'd love to hear from all of you, because obviously that gives us inspiration for more episodes that you want to hear about. So with that, I want to say thanks everybody for watching. Thank you to Prateek for joining us and kind of coming out of the background there to say some stuff. I guess the whiskey's a nice contrast as well. So for Prateek Singh, my name is Daniel Vacanti. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.
Yes.